I'm Aurora, 52, female. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind with manicured lawns and a sense of peaceful predictability. For the past 2 decades, this house has been my sanctuary, a place where I raised my son, Ethan, and built a successful career as a genetic counselor. Life was orderly, calm, and exactly how I liked it. That is, until Jessica came into the picture and showed me how quickly a carefully constructed life can be torn apart by a single, devastating secret. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. It all started a year ago when Ethan brought Jessica home for the first time. On the surface, she was everything a mother might hope for in a partner for her son. She was charming, bright-eyed, and laughed at all of Ethan's jokes. She worked as a barista at a trendy downtown cafe and spoke passionately about her dreams of opening her own artisanal coffee shop one day. She complimented my home, my cooking, and my career, her words dripping with what I then believed was genuine admiration. But even from that first meeting, something felt off. It was in the way her smile never quite reached her eyes, a flicker of something calculating behind the warmth. When she thought I wasn't looking, I'd catch her gaze sweeping over my home, not with appreciation, but with assessment. She wasn't just seeing a family home, she was taking inventory. She asked questions that felt a little too pointed, disguised as innocent curiosity. "This is such a beautiful house, Aurora. It must be worth a lot now." Or, "It's so wonderful that Ethan is your only child." Ethan, bless his heart, was completely smitten. He saw her as this ambitious, down-to-earth woman who adored him. He'd been a bit lost after college, jumping between freelance graphic design projects, and Jessica seemed to give him a new sense of purpose. He talked about her constantly, about their plans, about how she was the one. I tried to voice my subtle concerns, framing them as gentle motherly advice. "She seems lovely, honey. Just make sure you're both on the same page about your futures." Ethan would just smile, assuring me that they were perfect for each other. I wanted to believe him. For his sake, I pushed my instincts down, telling myself I was just being an overprotective mother. I welcomed her into our family gatherings, smiled through dinners where she subtly monopolized the conversation, and even offered to help her with a business plan for her cafe dream. I was playing the part of the supportive future mother-in-law, all while a knot of unease tightened in my stomach. The engagement was a surprise, announced over a family dinner 6 months after they met. Jessica flashed a modest but elegant ring, and Ethan beamed, his happiness so radiant it was almost blinding. I hugged them both, my smile genuine for my son's joy, but my heart heavy with reservation. They started talking about wedding plans vaguely, a spring wedding, maybe in a vineyard, something small and intimate. I offered to help, to contribute, wanting to be involved in what was supposed to be one of the happiest times in my son's life. But every time I brought it up, they were evasive. Jessica would say, "Oh, we're still figuring things out, Aurora. Don't worry, you'll be the first to know." Weeks turned into months, spring was approaching, and I hadn't heard a thing. No talk of venues, caterers, or guest lists. When I'd call Ethan to ask, he'd sound flustered and say, "Jess is handling it all. She wants it to be a surprise." It was strange, but I chalked it up to modern wedding trends or Jessica's desire to manage everything herself. The breaking point came on a Saturday afternoon. I had tickets to a bridal expo and thought it would be a fun way to gently nudge them into planning. I called Ethan, but he didn't pick up. So I drove over to their apartment, a bouquet of flowers in hand, ready to extend the olive branch and offer my help one more time. I found Jessica at home alone, packing a small suitcase. She seemed startled to see me. "Aurora, what a surprise," she said, her voice a little too bright. "I was just in the neighborhood." I lied smoothly. "I was hoping to take you and Ethan out for a late lunch, and I was wondering if you'd finally set a date. I haven't heard anything." Jessica stopped packing and looked at me, a slow, condescending smirk spreading across her face. It was the first time I had seen the mask truly slip, revealing the coldness underneath. She let out a small, airy laugh that didn't have an ounce of humor in it. "Oh, the wedding," she said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "You don't need to worry about that anymore. We got married last night." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs, my hand gripping the doorframe for support. What do you mean you got married? Where? Why wasn't I there?" Her smirk widened. "It was just a quick thing at the courthouse. We didn't want a big fuss. Ethan is just telling his friends now. We're heading off for a little honeymoon this evening. She zipped the suitcase with a sharp, final sound. We were going to tell you eventually. I stumbled back to my car, the flowers I'd brought lying forgotten on their doormat. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion, hurt, and a rising tide of anger. I tried calling Ethan again and again, but every call went straight to voicemail. He was actively ignoring me. The son I had raised, the boy whose scraped knees I had bandaged and whose teenage heartbreaks I had mended, had married the love of his life and hadn't even thought to invite his own mother. He finally called me back the next day. The connection was spotty. They were at a beach resort somewhere. His voice was strained, heavy with a guilt I could tell was being coached from the background. Mom, I'm so sorry. It was a last-minute decision. Jess and I just wanted it to be about us, you know. No, Ethan, I don't know. I said, my voice trembling with a hurt so deep it felt like a betrayal. How could you do this? How could you get married without me there? Jess thought it would be more romantic this way, he mumbled. No family drama, no stress. She said we could have a party later to celebrate with everyone. I could practically hear Jessica whispering in his ear. She had orchestrated this, isolated him, and turned the most important day of his life into a secret she held over me. I tried to reason with him, to make him see how manipulative this was, but it was like talking to a brick wall. He was defensive, repeating empty phrases about their love and their privacy. He was utterly blind to what she was doing. He ended the call by saying he had to go, that Jess was waiting for him. The line went dead, leaving me in a stunned, painful silence. In the days that followed, I felt a profound sense of loss. It wasn't just about missing the wedding. It was about the realization that my son was under the influence of a woman who was actively trying to cut him off from me. When they returned from their honeymoon, they moved with a chilling efficiency. They sold Ethan's small condo and, with a suspiciously large down payment, bought a new, much more expensive house in a trendy neighborhood. When I asked Ethan how they could afford it, he just said Jessica had some savings she'd been holding on to. Every conversation was superficial. Every attempt I made to connect was blocked by Jessica's sacker. In sweet interference, she was building a wall around my son, and I was on the outside. The hurt eventually began to curdle into suspicion. Jessica's story didn't add up. A barista with enough savings for a hefty down payment on a house, the secret wedding, it all felt like a calculated plan. My grief gave way to a cold, clear-headed resolve. I wasn't going to lose my son to this woman. I needed to understand who she really was. My first call was to my best friend, Sarah. Sarah wasn't just my friend. She was a brilliant financial advisor with a healthy dose of skepticism and a knack for seeing what others missed. I laid out the whole story for her over coffee, my voice cracking as I recounted the courthouse wedding and the new house. Sarah listened patiently, her expression growing more serious with every word. "Aurora, this stinks," she said flatly. "This isn't just a young couple in love. This is a strategy. A barista doesn't suddenly have $100,000 for a down payment." She told me where to start. "Look at public records, marriage licenses, property deeds. They can't hide everything." She also gave me the name of a private investigator she trusted, a discreet professional who specialized in financial background checks. "It's not cheap," she warned, "but peace of mind is priceless." I took her advice. I spent hours online, digging through county records. I found their marriage license, filed the day before Jessica's cold announcement. I found the deed to their new house, and that's where I got my first real shock. The loan was entirely in Ethan's name, but the deed listed both Ethan and Jessica as joint tenants with rights of survivorship. That meant if something happened to Ethan, the house would automatically go to her, bypassing me or any will he might have. Then I hired the private investigator. I gave him every piece of information I had on Jessica, her full name, her old address, the name of the cafe she worked at. I felt a pang of guilt, like I was betraying my son's trust, but the alternative, letting him walk blindly into a trap, was far worse. I needed to know what I was dealing with, and I had a sinking feeling it was much darker than just a secretive wedding. The investigator's report came a week later, and it was worse than I could have imagined. Jessica wasn't just a barista with a dream. She had a history. She had been married once before, a short-lived union to a wealthy man, 20 years her senior, who had died of a sudden heart attack just 6 months after their wedding. She had inherited a tidy sum from him, a fact she had conveniently omitted. But that wasn't the most damning part. The report detailed a pattern of targeting men with family money, of carefully isolating them from their loved ones before making her move. The savings for the down payment wasn't from tips, it was from her last husband's life insurance policy. Armed with this information, I knew I couldn't just confront Ethan. He was too deep under her spell. He would see it as an attack. I needed a different strategy. I needed leverage. My conversation with Sarah then turned from investigation to protection. We talked about my late husband, Ethan's father, and the inheritance he had left for our son. My husband had been a cautious man. He had set up a trust fund for Ethan, which he was due to inherit in full on his 30th birthday, just 4 years away. It was a substantial amount, the kind of money that would make Ethan a very attractive target. That's when Sarah mentioned something that made my blood run cold, in this state. She explained, inheritance is typically considered separate property, but if Ethan deposits that money into a joint account with Jessica, or uses it to buy joint assets, it becomes marital property. In a divorce, she could be entitled to half of it. It was clear now. The secret wedding, the house, the isolation. It was all a setup. She was playing the long game, waiting for Ethan's inheritance to come through. But my husband had been smarter than that. Sarah helped me review the trust documents, and we found it, a clause. The clause stated that the inheritance was conditional. It stipulated that before receiving the full amount, Ethan had to have a legally binding prenuptial agreement in place if he were to marry, an agreement designed to protect the family assets. If he married without one, the distribution of the funds would be at the sole discretion of the trustee, which was me. They had married at the courthouse. There was no prenup. Jessica had made a critical mistake. She had rushed thinking she could secure her position before anyone looked too closely, but in her haste she had overlooked the one thing that could unravel her entire plan. I planned it meticulously. I invited Ethan and Jessica over for dinner, under the guise of wanting to finally celebrate their marriage and bury the hatchet. Jessica was smug, clearly thinking she had won. She walked into my house with a proprietary air, her hand possessively on Ethan's arm. Ethan, for his part, seemed relieved, hoping this was a sign of reconciliation. We made it through the appetizers with forced, polite conversation. As I served the main course, I kept my voice calm and even. "Ethan," I began, looking directly at my son, "there's something we need to discuss. It's about your father's trust." Jessica's eyes lit up with a greedy flicker. This was what she had been waiting for. "As you know," I continued, "you're scheduled to receive your inheritance in a few years. However, your father was a very careful man. He included a specific clause in the trust, a clause that requires you to have a prenuptial agreement in place to protect the family assets." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. I saw the flash of panic in Jessica's eyes. Ethan just looked confused. A prenup. Dad never mentioned that to me. He didn't think he needed to until it was relevant, I said gently. "Because you got married at the courthouse without any legal arrangements, you haven't met the conditions of the trust. As the trustee, the disbursement is now at my discretion, and I will not be releasing the funds into a marriage that has no legal protection for them." Jessica's composure shattered. "You can't do that," she hissed, her voice sharp and ugly. "That money is Ethan's. It is. I agreed, and it will remain his and his alone. It will stay in the trust, protected." Ethan looked back and forth between us, the color draining from his face. "Mom, what is this? Why are you doing this?" That's when I laid the private investigator's report on the table. I didn't say a word. I just pushed it across to him. He opened it, his eyes scanning the first page. I watched as confusion turned to disbelief and then to a dawning, horrified understanding. He saw the record of her first marriage, the death certificate, the life insurance payout. He saw the pattern. "Jess," he whispered, looking at her, "what is this?" Jessica stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. Her face was a mask of fury. The charming, sweet girl was gone, replaced by a cornered animal. "It's nothing. Your mother is a manipulative old woman trying to break us up. Are you going to believe her, or are you going to believe your wife?" But the evidence was undeniable. The carefully constructed web of lies she had spun was unraveling before his eyes. He just stared at the papers, his world collapsing around him. The aftermath was messy. Jessica stormed out of my house that night, screaming threats and accusations. Ethan stayed, sitting at my dining room table in stunned silence for hours. He was heartbroken, not just because of the betrayal, but because of his own blindness. He had to confront the fact that the woman he loved had never really existed. The divorce was surprisingly quick. Once Jessica realized there was no inheritance to fight for, her motivation to stay married vanished. She tried to get half the value of the house, but since the down payment was made with funds from her previous, undisclosed inheritance, and the mortgage was solely in Ethan's name, her claim was weak. My lawyer was ruthless. In the end, she walked away with very little, certainly not the grand prize she had been aiming for. It took a long time for Ethan to heal. He was embarrassed, ashamed, and felt incredibly foolish. We had many long, difficult conversations. I never once said, "I told you so." I just listened, supported him, and helped him pick up the pieces. He started going to therapy to understand how he had allowed himself to be so thoroughly deceived. Slowly, the confident, happy son I knew began to reemerge from the wreckage. He sold the house they had bought together, wanting to shed the last reminder of her. He moved into a smaller apartment and poured his energy into his graphic design work, finally launching the freelance career he had always talked about. Our relationship, once strained to the breaking point, became stronger than ever. We rebuilt our trust brick by brick. As for me, I learned a valuable lesson about trusting my instincts. I reclaimed my role as a mother, not just as a provider, but as a protector. I had seen the darkness that had tried to envelop my son, and I had fought back. Life is quiet and predictable again, but it's a peace that was hard. One, my son is safe, he is happy, and he is free, and that is a victory worth more than any inheritance.